Hi, so I'm Yvonne Poitras Pratt. I'm an associate professor at the Werklund School of Education. I'm also their director of Indigenous education and a three-time alumni from the University of Calgary. So all 3 degrees from the university. Really excited to take part in this conversation about community engagement, since this forms the basis of my scholarship and my time at the university, and in my role as a faculty member. I'm from my parents are both from the Fishing Lake Métis Settlement in northeastern Alberta, card-carrying member of the Métis Nation, and I'm really excited to see the University of Calgary lift up community engagement as a central pillar of its strategy moving forward.
We're all waiting for who's going to go on next. Okay, so I'll briefly introduce myself again. My name is Rita Bouvier, and I am a retired educator. I've spent, as I said, formally 37 years in public education, and lately I have been working with the Werklund School of Education, and with the most recent project involving Jennifer and Yvonne, and so pleased to be here.
I'll go next. My name is Betty. It's Betty Letendre. People know me by Miss Betty. I mentioned that earlier. I chose Miss Betty because I don't refer to myself as an elder in the English language. I use my Cree language, which is I'm referred to as a Kehteya, the old one. So that's how I use Miss Betty. I'm Cree, Métis. My parents were my first teachers. They left off the land, etc. And up until my adult years, I still, am foremost always about educating not only the youth but our people in any way that I can. Being given the honorary, not an honorary, but an honor to be that you would know it as an eldership, to that bestowed to me, over 40 years ago, and how I carry that title and that respect for that name, for that who I am. And I'm a grandmother. Well, I'm a mother, grandmother, and a great grandmother. Not only to my immediate family, but other families that I've adopted. So I do a lot of work in my community, involved with a school district here in Edmonton and many other organizations I'm involved. But I enjoy being with Werklund School of Education in Calgary. I felt like I was, I shouldn't say, I just feel really humbled that I was asked to be part of that with my dear friend and for many years, and to continue to support where I can when organizations, institutes are doing such great work and with Indigenous education. That's just who I am. And I mean, I don't want to keep you long because I got a whole long bio history, and it's that's for another time. So I thank you for listening to me today, and I hope I spoke on some of the topics that I looked at the questions, and then I did a little bit of my own research in my way that I, from my life experience. I'm a lifelong learner. I continue to live and learn every day. I'm, I guess in my who I am as as a woman, as a Cree woman, a life giver, that, you know, nobody can have that PhD that I have from my culture, my language, and from the people who have helped me along the way. So I thank you all for this morning and in the invitation.
I'm Jennifer Markides, and I'm a member of the Métis Nation of Alberta and a member of the Métis Nation. And I am an Eyes High postdoctoral fellow with the Werklund School of Education at the University of Calgary. And I have the great pleasure of working with and learning from Ms. Betty, Rita, and Yvonne as part of a strong Métis team of educators and researchers as well. We were working as a team to support a project sponsored by Pembina Pipeline Corporation with the Peace Wapiti Public School Division in Northern Alberta. And from that partnership, I've had the great pleasure of meeting Natalie Morris with the Fort Vermilion School Division and partnering with her to begin research as well. And it's just a huge honor to be involved in community-led research, moving from community engaged to community led, as the ownership of the work really does belong to the communities we're partnering with. And so, to see that work live on long past the time of research is an important aspect of this type of work. And so I'm just grateful to be involved in learning from these amazing people.
Thank you, Jennifer. My name is Natalie Morris. I am the Supervisor of Learning Services for the Fort Vermilion School Division. Our office is located here in the hamlet of Fort Vermilion, right on the banks of the mighty Peace River. I was born and raised here. My mom loves to tell people that she just about didn't make it into the delivery room with me. So at the time, she was hatching out eggs in an incubator, and she needed to make sure they were all rotated before she went into the hospital. That was her primary concern. So she held back till the very last minute and then got into the hospital, and they had just constructed St. Teresa's Hospital up at the top of the hill. And so they had, like nice sod that had been laid. And that's where she decided she was going to give birth. And fortunately, 2 nurses scooped her up and took her inside. So I can say that I was formally born in St. Teresa's Hospital. So I've been absolutely blessed to be born here and raised in Northern Alberta. It's very much my home. I love the huge skies and everything that's been gifted to me from this land. So thank you so much for having me here today.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ryck Chalifoux. I am currently the long-term arrangements lead at the Métis Settlements General Council, a little more than 2 years, but prior to that, I've spent over 20-some years in and out of either the administration or the elected area of the Fishing Lake Métis settlement, to which the project that we were so grateful. I guess at the time we didn't know we'd be grateful, but that Yvonne had pitched to us, and a counterpart of mine from Fishing Lake was actually more involved than I was, Susan Barthel, and I'm want to give her a shout out, because if it wasn't for her, I don't think I would have bought into it as much as I did. But it was a wonderful experience for me, because I got to see the interaction between generations, and I think the storytelling itself was an element that I see missing in many of our Aboriginal communities, that bridge the 2 generations in a fashion that you don't often see. So I just thought the project was extremely wonderful opportunity for our community and for others. And I still think it would be a valuable tool going forward to try to save some of our stories from our elders, but at the same time to bring our youth along. And there's so many areas that I think that this project has opened our eyes as far as bringing some pride back to the communities, especially through the youth, and bridging the gap between the generations. So Of course, anytime Yvonne asks me to, and I'm available, I certainly will, because I believe in this project, and I'm very grateful that she did bring it to our community, and we'd like to see more across the rest of the settlements for sure.
Well, I introduced myself as Miss Betty, and I am an esteemed elder within our country. I've been doing this work for many years, and I've been very honored to work with Werklund School of Education, being invited, I think about 6 years ago, where I, was in the classroom with Yvonne and worked with the calls to action, the master's program for educators. So what an experience when we talk about community members coming in to an institution like the university, myself, and being introduced where that my expertise is in the field of my language and my culture and all the knowledge and wisdom that, I still continue to attain, that what an awesome experience, and I still continue to do that today. And wherever I can, I don't know if I want to say, I can't say. Well, community relationships with universities really do matter. And when we say, what does community engagement, how does it matter? Well, it matters. I mean, I was just listening to, before I go on to something else, I was listening to Jennifer and Natalie. And then, but prior to that, the introduction was from Bridget and how that extended to, from one community to another and to us now. That's what a community engagement means, that we come together to understand and advocate and support each other, from the University of Calgary, community. When we build those relationships with community and how we engage, for me, it's when we go into the community, some community we don't even know, and we go and we collaborate and we partnership, etc. Just think about the amount of youth that we're reaching within those communities. Maybe you wouldn't have had that opportunity to be given to say, yeah, you can go university, you can do these things, you can be what I'm doing today. For me, that's really huge. As when we ask me what does community engagement matters, that's just a little bit of how much it matters to community. I'll stop there.
Okay. Well, to answer the, I'll just take a few minutes here. What I was thinking of when you initially asked that question, I had thought about it earlier, but I think that it's really important to, first of all, acknowledge that we're coming from a history and a context of when research used to be done to our communities. And so part of my own work with so many others across the country began, I think, in the early 80s when we came together as part of an organization called Mokakit. The Blackfoot Nation will recognize that because it's a Blackfoot name, which meant excellence in education. And we came together, we were a very, very small group, but we came together across the country because we wanted to challenge the Eurocentric research paradigm that was applied to our communities, and which often resulted in really deficit theorizing. I was looking for the language, and it often resulted in the essentialization of Indigenous people and our communities. And we did not want to be a part of that. And so we came out swinging, is how I want to say that. This small group of us, and that's like 40 years ago. And a lot has changed since then. So we're coming out of a context of colonization and the impact of that on our communities. And I just refuse to be a part of that story. And we, I think, now are, working hard to why this work matters, why community engagement matters, is that I think communities are, looking for the kind of support that will assist them in strengthening the capacity of their own communities. And I don't think we need to provide the answers for them. That's the other thing that I have learned through my connection worldwide, is that we have adopted a mantra of the answers lie within us. And all of the work I've done so far has lived that out. If you engage in ways that are respectful with the community, you will be astounded by the kind of learning that will result, not just you as researcher coming in, but the community as a whole. And as I say, I don't think you need to feel as academics going out to communities that you have to have the answer. I think together, by engaging with the community, you come up with the kinds of information, knowledge that the community is seeking, so it can address some of the challenges that it's facing as a result of colonization. So maybe I'll leave it there for now, but to me, it does matter. And I think universities are institutions that can provide that kind of support, much like governments should in 2021.
Rita, well said. I would have to say that that's been a huge journey. I often remind people, and have to remind myself constantly, that to be compassionate with ourselves and to be gentle. We're all in this journey, and we all, like little bits of information land with us at particular times. And that's been huge. Walking alongside and often behind Jennifer as she's put the proposals in for the research to kind of, dive into our beautiful communities has been such a gift and such a blessing. And it's really important to remember that I'm a visitor to this community. Even though I've lived here my whole life, it's a gift to be able to be here. And I really want to honor that gift. And I want to know as authentically and organically as possible what it is that the youth and the community want us to know as educators visiting their communities. And so it's amazing that we have this platform and group of phenomenal individuals that are able to do that with that complete objective lens. And it really is about, it's going in without that jaded view of here's the end product, right? Which, like I said, is sometimes very difficult for educators. We like to know that finished product so that we can work backwards from it. But being able to kind of say, I'm going to let go of that. Who knows where we're going to go in the end? We're going to let our community drive that. And my perception of what community engagement looks like is going to be very different than what the elders in the community and what the youth of the community want that experience to look like and want their engagement to look like. And we need to be 100% open to that end product being whatever it'll be.
Just, yeah, so grateful to be learning in this, as part of this Werklund School of Education team from Miss Betty, from Rita, from Yvonne. This is a phenomenal experience for me and an opportunity that I wouldn't have anywhere else, to be learning from, you know, such wise, strong advocates, educators. It's been just a real gift to me to be able to be learning from them in the work that I'm doing with communities and alongside them with the communities. So I would just want to begin with acknowledging that's you know, to be on this type of team isn't necessarily what's done in other research projects, and I just really think that it is something that should be looked at as a model for you know, creating really you know, dynamic engagement and learning opportunities, even for, you know, for academics, for up and coming emerging scholars. So I just appreciate that. And then to connect to what Ms. Betty said earlier about the connections, you know, this work with communities is really about relationships. And so, you know, we are always judged by our actions. And so, you know, we have to be just authentic and honest and open-minded, and, you know, just coming in not as the experts of the communities we're engaging with. You know, we're there to learn from them and to listen. And so, you know, that's a huge part of this process. And so working with communities sometimes works on a longer timeline than other research projects where, you know, the questions are predetermined and the process is predetermined. Working with communities, you know, we have to be open to all of the possibilities and the shifts and the directions that the research may take and the partnership. So I think that's, you know, those are important pieces to keep in mind when entering into this type of work. But it's so powerful, like what can come from these types of partnerships is really, you know, profound and can be life-changing for people that are involved, as well as, you know, for the youth within the schools. That's, you know, a goal of many of these projects is to make a difference in the lives of the Indigenous youth and really all the youth that are part of the school divisions. And I think that this type of work has that tremendous potential, and, you know, doing it in the time that it takes and in a good way, we can really serve communities. So I'm just so honored to be part of this and grateful for everyone speaking here today.
So from my perspective, so I work at the Werklund School of Education, and I'm currently their Director of Indigenous Education. For me, community engagement as an academic, Métis academic at the Werklund School, really is about the university catching up. So Indigenous research has long recognized the need for the involvement of community. And so I remember I'm a 3-time graduate of the University of Calgary, and I remember sitting in my undergraduate classes and then in my master's classes and listening to the ways in which Indigenous peoples were described and talked about in different resources and textbooks. And I remember thinking to myself, I wonder. So, you know, being able to return to my mother and father's home community of Fishing Lake Métis Settlement really allowed me to return to who I was. And so having been schooled in a very colonial type curriculum, working within community has meant that I have gotten to know the strength, the beauty, the resilience of our Métis communities in northeastern Alberta. And now working within the University of Calgary and working with practicing and new teachers, I've come to see how others have been impacted by the beauty of the work that we've done. Ryck and I worked together along with Susan Barthel back in 2009. We started the work in Fishing Lake Métis Settlement. And the community itself had a lot of faith and trust, as you heard in Ryck's intro. They had no idea what digital storytelling was all about, and they were really relying on their trust in me. And they knew my relatives in the community, but they didn't really know me. And so as a new academic at the time, entering into my ancestral community, it really has meant the world to me in understanding who I am in the world. And that return to who I am has really allowed me now to give back to my community, to give back to the university that I studied at. And it really means welcoming, embracing Indigenous knowledge traditions. I've been very honored to have Betty alongside of me teaching the Call to Action program. She brings us back to our ancestral traditional ways through the Cree language, her beautiful sharing of ceremonies in our classroom. And so it is through community engagement, I think, that you really get authentic learning experiences. And that's what really, I think, community engagement is to me. It is that relational, beautiful way of building connections beyond the walls of the university and out into the community, where education can really make a difference for all of us, including our children and grandchildren to come.
I think a community that would welcome an academic researcher definitely would be to benefit their community. They're the ones that carry the history of that community and their people. I think it's really important to remember that when they are invited to be part of that research, they are going there to study and to break barriers for people. Sometimes the communities don't have access to institutions, universities, etc. Sometimes I know because I've worked in different communities, that the youth will sometimes, and some communities will be sent out of their communities to finish their high schools, etc., and then have to come back to their communities. And I think coming in, when you're invited to come in, I'm not specifically for that, but coming in to work with the community, I think is such an honor, because you get to learn about the history. You get to learn to not only enhance your own learning as a researcher, but because we're always lifelong learners. I learn all the time. And for me, that's a great gift that, is so important. I guess for me, it's more of researchers coming in to know the people, the land, their Indigenous ways, the sacred ways of their lives, however, if they've been colonized and still maybe are, that they can see a way out through academia, coming in and saying, just as, I was never so, touched when I was invited to be part of Werklund School of Education and to work alongside such a great educator as my friend Yvonne You know, I was just like, and one of the, you know, calls to action, you know, educating what education worldview left out of our education system for as to understand as an Indigenous person that your worldview of who you are as an Indigenous person now can be taught in these, you know, from high school, from kindergarten, high school to universities. And for me, that's really huge. And I'm very honored to have, you know, I never ever thought in my life I would ever see that happening with any university. I don't see that with my university. Well, I don't say mine, but the university here, and I don't have to name any names. But I'm really, really, um, grateful, I'll say, for myself and how the University of Calgary, Werklund, have brought that Indigenous perspective. So it's just everywhere. It's like, it just seeps into every classroom, every corridor in that university. And for me, that really is, fills my heart, because that's, you know, I could tell you stories of my history of who I am and how I was taught and how I grew up. But that's for another time. But today I want to say that as a community member here and many other places, you know, that research is something that is highly needed. And when you're invited, you go, and you don't have to learn what's all in that community. That's going to make you, as a researcher, more open. You're going to be more powerful when you write that document. And when the people see it, you're going to be held in high esteem, because you've chosen to use their languages, their ways. We've had scientists in our prior to the scientists we know now in our communities. We had all of that, and we still do that today. So it's having that balance, bringing that balance of what was done orally, which is slowly being written today, in what is in that academia world, and that they could be brought together to have that a balance of what every individual from whatever community that is, every youth, every child has an opportunity to gain from those strengths of their own people. Hi.
Yeah. Well, I'm just repeating that question. Why might a community welcome academic research? Right, that's the question. And well, I hearken back to a comment I made earlier, which actually was something that was part of the feedback given to a group of us who went out in Saskatchewan to listen to the communities on, it was the Joint Task Force on Education and Employment. And as I said, I made reference to this earlier, where the communities said to us, you know, we don't want the governments or institutions to provide answers for us. What we want them to do is to support us so we can strengthen our own capacities as communities. Like we need you to step up in a meaningful way. So that's what they said to us. And that's what I've repeated over and over again, you know, when I have an opportunity to say it. And I think the reason why a community might welcome academic researchers into their community is for that purpose. I think you have to go in there to support them in meeting their goals and their needs. And I also always want to add, they face a lot of challenges, but as communities, we also have aspirations as communities. And so I think you need to take those two into consideration. So they want to meet their own goals and aspirations. And that's, I think, why a community would welcome you. And there are many challenges, so I don't need to name them. But the other point I wanted to make, I think that's really critical here. And that's why the listening becomes so important. I know that when I work in communities, I often come in well prepared, because what I want to do is be listening very hard, not just to the words that the people are saying to us when we go out to the community, because I'm often working in a supportive capacity to universities, not only with the University of Calgary and a couple of projects I've been involved in, but here at the University of Saskatchewan as well. But what I am listening for is, and I think it comes from having done the kind of work I have been involved in through the World Council on Indigenous People, that our communities are now in the process of, rebuilding and renewal, and the sustainability of not just the communities, but this planet is critical in their, in their overtures to us. And so I think that there's it's really important that we listen, not with a Western worldview. When we go into those communities, I think you have to listen hard to hear the worldview that is embedded in that community. And you learn that through the kind of knowledge they share with you and the kind of values they underscore when you go out to talk to the community. I just want to tell, again, this is spontaneous, it's as authentic as it can be. I just remember during the Joint Task Force meetings, community gatherings that we held, town hall meetings, I will always, I remember two voices, but I just tell one story of one voice. And I won't name the individual because I know her very well. It was an elder in the community, and I always love it because, everyone is talking about, making sure our kids graduate, which of course is important, making sure we're employed, but there's a lone voice in the audience that says, but don't forget that we live on this land, and it is the land that we need to take care of. And so when we start talking about, sustainability of our communities, that's what I mean by you need to really listen hard, because oftentimes they are taking us back into a larger sphere of wholeness, which is like the ecological sustainability of the planet. And so her voice really always resonated with me. And it's easy in a conversation like that to dismiss her because she's not addressing education per se or addressing employment per se, but she is.
That was like really touching me. I was getting goosebumps. You probably saw me leaning in closer and closer. Rita, I really, really appreciate that. And that's so true, right? Something that I often say to myself it's become a little catchphrase, is to listen as passionately as you would like to be heard. I'm a speaker. I've always been a little bit of a chatterbox. It's definitely an attribute that's, you know, my parents saw as being really important to install in me. So I like to speak academically. I like to be heard. But it is, the older I get, the more I recognize it is way more important to listen as passionately as you would like to be heard. And yeah, Rita, absolutely, to listen with your heart, right? And to not dismiss things that could potentially not fit your trajectory or fit what your intent is. And that's what I love so much about the prospect of this project with Jennifer, is that, you know, she's going to be invited into our beautiful communities without that intent, that preconceived notion where you would tend to dismiss the stuff that's coming in from the communities. And yeah, it really does give the knowledge of the communities and the strength that they have, that platform to be heard through research.
I believe, you know, community engagement, as we've heard now from the several speakers, it is the heart of Indigenous research. And I certainly could not have done the project without the support and the willingness and trust, I think, of our community members up in the Fishing Lake Métis settlement. What I have really, I think, appreciated with my research activities from my dissertation onwards is the ways in which, you know, those lifelong relationships that you build through community-based research then are able to really contribute to Indigenous education as a larger picture. So in thinking about, you know, the digital stories that we did in the Fishing Lake settlement community, there's 19 of them now. And just recently in the fall, I was able to work with some other Métis educators up in Edmonton at the Rupert's Land Institute. And we were able to take that collection of 19 digital stories, and we were able to work alongside the storytellers to create teaching resources from the community's perspective. So it's been this really beautiful momentum that has built from the project. So you're not just in there for a finite amount of time. I think with true community-based research, you're there for a lifetime. And so the digital stories, you know, Rick and I have known each other now for into decades. And so we've really built a friendship that, you know, 10 years later from the project, he's still willing to take time out of his schedule to come and pop in and tell you about the type of research that we did. And that's because of the impact in the community. So the community continues to really hold up the digital stories as authentic Métis voices. And now with the resources that we've built around 9 of the 19 digital stories, we're able to have community lead Métis education and start to help produce foundational knowledge about the Métis from their perspectives. So I really think that's the heart of community engagement. You are privileging, centering the Indigenous community members in the production of new knowledge, foundational knowledge. And that to me is really, you know, what I feel so strongly about. And I think that is something that really is the meaning behind the work that I do. And so any way that I can think of as an academic to include our communities in the production of knowledge around our people, you know, I am really keen to do that, because that's what's been missing all these years. And that's, you know, what Rita spoke to, the silencing, the marginalization of our voices. Our work as Indigenous academics is now really to help our communities regain that voice and to be strengthened by our voices in the university. So that's what gives me purpose in life. And it is a lot of extra work, as Jennifer pointed out. I would say that it's easily 3 to 4 times the typical research project because you are working to build trust and relationships, and then the work continues well past any funding or program completion deadlines. So it is about an ongoing, lifelong relationship.
Again, just as a Métis researcher, Métis person, to be able to work with communities, with Métis communities in the north of Alberta, as well as First Nations that share that territory, is just you know, the most rewarding work I could imagine being part of. You know, it's not every day that you can work in service of communities and to work in service of, you know, the communities the relations you have, the relations you belong to, to be able to form those relationships, I think are the most meaningful things we can be doing. I mean, that is at the heart of reconciliation, is that relationship building, to repair relationships that have been harmful for generations. And so that needs to be, you know, central in everything that we're doing. And so, you know, whatever it is we're doing to lift up the voices and the knowledge within communities, that's important. And the relationships that last beyond that are key.
I think the guidance or advice, if that's what you would call it, would be when you're invited, that you go with a very open mind and that you are there as a guest. When you're invited, you become a guest. And then from there, you learn to make start to get to know the people. There may be, you know, whoever's in lead, you go talk to them. And I think it's, you know, when you get a little bit of that information and kind of get what you're into, if you hadn't already known that, is don't go with assumptions that this is this or this is that, or, you know, this is how it's been for years, etc. No, go with an open mind, of course, an open mind that you're going to learn and do your research in the best possible way and a respectful way you can. Because if you go in there and they can tell right away whether you're authentic or you're just there to collect data, information. I've had, you know, many people throughout the years, you know, tell me, not another researcher, you know, they just come here, look at us, and then they make this big report and they go back wherever they come from and, you know, stack that paper on the shelf somewhere. But where did they talk about if there was, how could the partnerships and the relationships be built from us to whoever the researcher? You know, you're going there, whole open-mindedness, and you're going there always the well-being and capturing that community to the best of your ability. I go back to Yvonne's digital stories, and when she first had them and hadn't was working on them to use them as in the education system. You know, we would sit and I would listen and to the people that were on these digital stories, and it was like going back in time and historically, and taking that opportunity to take such precious stories and teachings from your own people you hadn't known that existed there. And once you found that, you took that and you were so very gentle with it. You were so very gentle with it. You worked with that community. She worked with that community. Her people from there, they got to know who she was. They didn't just say, okay, you come tell these stories and then you can go. She was from that community. She had to go and visit. She didn't have to, they didn't ask her, but she went and made that for herself. So these stories now, and that's many stories we need to tell, become so authentic because it's the people. It's their stories, it's who they are. And I think when you go into a community, you know, it takes a long time, And I'm still waiting for my digital story, so. Thought I'd throw that in there. Me and you, Rita, our turn.
Yeah, our turn. That's right. Somebody needs to tell their story.
So, you know, it's like if somebody were to come into your house, you know, they wouldn't just come in and start making themselves at home. Well, our kids do, but even then, sometimes there's limits. So that's what I mean. You go in a community and you put all your worth in there so you can gain this, whatever that is. And to be patient, as Rita said, to listen, because we don't always have to be talking. When the people are talking and you're listening, there's certain things that you can, you know, that'll come to mind just from that listening skill. The old people used to say to us, that's why you got 2 of these and 1 of these. And that's a powerful teaching, especially when you go in there. So, you know, I know it'll all work out, and, you know, research that's been done out of Werklund with our Indigenous scholars has, you know, just been phenomenal for me. And it's just, and what you're going, when you're going into these communities, think about those scholars that are going to be coming through the university and becoming those scholars as well. Because, you know, you're going to reach people far beyond what your thoughts are. Get to know the people. Get to know the community, get to know the history, get to know whatever you can, and you will be rewarded, you know. You'll become part of that community always. It's just not when you finish your research where you're going to walk away from it and say, well, that's done. You know, if you do that, then you better just burn your research papers, because if you hadn't come away with such humbleness, then you haven't done your job as a researcher. Oh, Ixamaga, hi. Thank you.
Well, I think that, you know, I'm not sure if I can add any more, Betty, but I think Betty has really captured, you know, all of the kinds of advice I would also be providing. One of the thoughts that entered my own head when I was listening to the question earlier was, you know, there are 2 ways, of course, that researchers can enter a community where they have a research interest, you know, around a particular topic, and they want to go to a community and learn from that community. And then there's when you're invited. And I think that whether it's one by invitation or one where you are seeking, you know, learning for your own purposes, you still have to go in, as Betty said, really with an open mind. You know, you may find that your research question has to change a little bit. Or it may have to be tweaked to meet the needs of the community and their interests. as well. And I'm saying that because I just happened to just recently receive some work that was being done in my home community. And the young man has shared it with me because he lived in my house while he was doing his work in the community. And that's what happened to him. He went into the community because he had a particular interest in a particular topic, but found he had to change his questions because the community also had needs. And so to reconcile his learning needs with what the community wanted addressed, he found himself redefining what he was going to do. And so I think you have to do that. And as Betty says, you have to, all the values I think that Betty has outlined are really critical. So I don't think I really need to repeat them. It's that willingness to learn. I think that is really so critical. And one of the things that, other things that I would say is, it might be scary as well that when you start to, once you are welcomed, and you'll know when you've been welcomed, they might even give you a name, a nickname. That's a good sign. I don't know if some of you have already, the researchers here from the U of Calgary have been given names, but sometimes they'll give you a name. Then you'll know that you have, that welcome mat has been rolled out for you. But I think it can be scary that when people start identifying, the people that you might talk to, and they may not speak English in some of the communities. Maybe their mother tongue is still their first language, and I'm talking about older people. You shouldn't be scared of that either. I think, we live in an age where people can really translate some of that, that conversation for you as a researcher. And so as I say, it's just an idea that popped in my head, because I think that's where you're going to find some really rich kinds of knowledge. And yeah, so don't dismiss, people whose primary language is an Indigenous language. And I'm thinking particularly of the older people. I used to be a translator for my grandfather. I tell tales out of school all the time. I used to be a little translator for my grandfather. And he pretended that he didn't understand what was going on in English, but he did. Because one time when I translated for him, he said, "That's not what I said." She's twisted my words. That was so funny.
I think that was incredibly well said. I was writing down little short kind of value words that I thought were really important, and Betty, you captured all of them. The one thing that I would add that keeps kind of popping up for me is being aware of your bias and checking them at the door. So I think a sign of a really strong researcher is the ability to understand the lens in which you carry, and the ability to check that and understand that it's starting to kind of impact or influence. I mean, we're all humans, it's going to. I think the better researcher you are, the more apt you are to be able to identify that's a bias. I need to check that at the door, and I need to keep that completely objective view. Yeah, so thank you.
So how can the University of Calgary engage in more community engagement? Well, I think supporting Indigenous scholars in much the beautiful way, I think, that the Indigenous strategy team has really carved a pathway for us to see what Indigenous research, Indigenous scholarship, all of those different realms, community engagement to me is just as important as scholarship. Indeed, it's now being valued at the same level as scholarship, which is a big breakthrough, I think, at the University of Calgary. Advice I would have, I was opening up some different sites. And what I really have found as an Indigenous scholar is that the more that you commit yourself to community engagement processes, the busier you get. And so I really find that, you know, I work almost daily with the Métis Nation of Alberta. And in fact, that's why I'm sort of looking over here thinking, okay, I'm going to sneak away because the community is calling me, and they always are my priority. Of course, I do my faculty role in addition, but the community engagement is really what keeps me tied to the university. It's what keeps me really committed to the work that I do in Werklund. And, you know, I think our own faculty, the Werklund School of Education, the leadership, the support team, the way that they have willingly come on board within decolonizing and indigenizing efforts also keeps me there, because it really is showing that we are working together as a group. And I think the University of Calgary has also shown that same authentic commitment with their structural changes. So with the hiring of a vice provost, Indigenous engagement, you know, we really are looking at how the university can open up and make space for all of the extra roles and commitments that come alongside community engaged scholarship. I'm looking, you know, with the Métis Nation of Alberta, I work in what's called Métis Education through the Alberta Métis Education Council. And so the digital storytelling aspect of my research is a small part of the wider scope of Métis education. And I've been really privileged to work alongside Métis educators who are housed up in Edmonton at the Ruppersland Institute. And we're working really hard to produce foundational knowledge about the Métis from a number of different thematic areas. But yeah, community engagement really is the heart and soul of my scholarship and my research. But really, it's not about me and my, it really is about us and together and our. So yeah, I think that's enough said.
I would have to agree with Yvonne, just the leadership from Werklund, and to be able, it's been such a privilege to learn from so many Indigenous scholars on faculty, you know, in graduate assistant researcher roles, you know, to know that that I'm learning from people who have such like integrity, and they treat what the knowledge that's shared through the research as sacred. And, you know, it's that sort of responsible treatment of our role that does kind of grow the network of relations and the network of work that we're doing through that, you know, really honoring the work and the partnerships all the way through and beyond. And so, you know, I've really been grateful to learn that this is the type of work that I want to do for my whole career. Like, I just see so much value in it. And you know, by doing, I think, by doing the work well, that's how this type of research, these partnerships grow. So, you know, quickly the word spreads, and you know, you've got more work than you can take up. So I think that that's really speaks to the importance of it, and the importance of doing it well, you know, with respect and integrity, and you know, just honoring the partnerships. And so that's really been important learning, and something that will carry forward with me throughout my career. So I'm just grateful for that.
I think when you have leadership, those in power, leadership, I think that makes makes the university, I mean, when we have a leadership, I should say, that honors the Indigenous worldview, and to have researchers going into, you know, Indigenous communities, etc., to partner. I think there should be University of Calgary, Werklund School of Education should be having maybe a facility, an academic of excellence Indigenous research program, an Indigenous-led program where people from any community that want to have a researcher come out. This would be a center for that Indigenous voice, authentic Indigenous voice. That way, I think, I mean, even from what Werklund has right now, that is so huge to have been doing this over the years. But I think to make it more authentic and to be, you know, to really honor, I mean, not that they're not honoring, but the honor should be that center as an extension. Because right now I sit on a council of many elders and throughout from University of Werklund, university here, community here, and elders, youth, etc. That, you know, and I know the elders that I sit with from the Werklund University, I mean, Werklund School of Education, University of Calgary, have done some great work and will continue to do that and to be that authentic voice, you know, to support non-Indigenous people that are our allies already, but educate them further to our Indigenous way of high academics, of education. Therefore, you know, we're going to get a lot more people from the communities, especially our youth, to to finish and graduate and be doctors, have their doctorates, etc. You know, I'm so proud working with so many students. We counted 70 that we put through high school and into universities right now. And that's been working 20 years and working with a leadership program for youth. Nobody wants a grade 9 to grade 12. Nobody wanted them. They said, oh, how could you work with these youth? They're so bad. They're so this and that. I said, that's who I want to work with. And that's what I still do today. So I think having, you know, the leadership from Werklund School of Education, honoring all that are Indigenous, you know, scholars, and they get it. They get it. That this huge Indigenous education that we that have been around for thousands of years is just coming into forefront now. So, an Indigenous Education Center. Thank you.